Okay, here we are broadcasting every Thursday on the most significant research and news for creating your most beautiful, healthy life. And I am Dr. Ray Wisniewski, and I'm here every Thursday. Today we got started just a little bit late. We're here at Thursdays at 12 noon. And let me just put that on here. And today we're going to be talking again about brown fat. But I want to remind everybody you can see us every Saturday at 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. in our, not only do we do a live stream, but that is simultaneously broadcast on KDKA Radio, which is the very first radio station in the United States. And again, and of course, we do the program for science and just research every Thursday at 12 noon. It's all about creating your most beautiful, healthy life and the most significant research and news for that. And I'll tell you what, there's one of the things, there's some research that came out, and let's just see if we can, if I can just bring some of that up here on this. Okay, and this was from, you can just see, and I'm going to go over a couple different things. This is Got Good Fat. It's from the University of Bonn. And one of the things that they're talking about is something called microRNA 92A, which inversely is correlated with brown fat activity. And it's the microRNA 92A is really known to be responsible for some gene regulations, but it's a great measurement. They found out that you can indirectly measure the energy consumption of brown fat. And the way that it works, and the reason why that would be even important is because we always want to say, if you have brown fat, remember it's going to be in the supraclavicular area, it's in the neck, it's in right around in the back area, coming down along towards the shoulders. If you can activate this brown fat, it's activated when the temperature lowers, just 2 ounces. Just 2 ounces of this will burn 200 calories during the day. And what they found out is that people that have low BMIs, people who are thin, they have much more of this brown fat. And that what it is these people can burn a lot of energy. And we know that brown fat helps burn energy. So one of the things I want to go through is really just explain what are some of the things that can cause brown fat to and I went through. I hope you go back and watch the part 1, because I go through like not only where brown fat is, how do you get it, like what it does, some of the research behind it. But there's, for instance, I talked about a fact that brown fat activity is affected by something called creatinine clearance, and one of the things that's going to help that is NutriMost, and so we like that. The brown fat's influenced by having good circulation. If you have bad circulation, what we find out is that your brown fat can't work properly, and the reason is because you need so much energy for it. So if you have something that requires a ton of energy and you can't get the oxygen for that, it's going to be a problem. So there's a lot of things that stimulate this. And I went through some of the foods, and we know that, for instance, calorie restriction stimulates brown fat activity. We know that exercise inhibits brown fat activity. But probably none of them really hold a candle to cold thermogenesis, and that is exposure to cold. And so, that's taking cold showers. There's actually vests that you can use in it, but it really comes down to, remember, where you have the brown fat, that's where you want to make sure that's the area that you want to have the cold. But there's some other things, because one of the things that we know is there are substances that help increase brown fat. For instance, we know that melatonin helps increase brown fat. And we talked about that there are different foods that have melatonin in, including like healthy nuts. Now remember, if you're going to, nuts are very energy dense. In other words, they have a lot of calories within them. And so when we see things like almonds and sunflower seeds, that are high in melatonin. Remember though, that's going to, you have to counter that and say, hey, you can't eat a bunch of calories to do that as well, because there still is a balance. But what we found out is that people who have good brown fat, they could eat a huge amount of excess calories and not really gain weight. You know, and you take a look at some of this stuff. I mean, I talked last week about just they showed a brown fat transplant actually reversed type 1 diabetes, which is really just crazy. That was an embryonic brown fat transplant. So I don't want to, but the thing is, I want to put out the research in this, and the reason is because it's been shown to help. You can increase the amount of glucose that's going into the cell by somewhere around 12 times. I'm actually going to get to that in just a little bit, because there's a little bit more to that. Because one of the things that we want to do is we want to activate the AMP, activated protein kinase pathway, and we want to inhibit mTOR. So there are certain factors that are going to aid us within that. For instance, we know that FGF21, fibroblast growth factor 21, we know that helps stimulate weight loss, that helps stimulate metabolism, that's going to help us so many things. So how do we affect FGF21? Well, one of the best things is the molecular hydrogen, and that's going to help us with that AMP activated protein kinase pathway. So is resveratrol. So we love our product ResveraMost. We know that curcumin will actually help do that. You know, so when we start to take a look at some of these different, factors, and the factors that affect, and by the way, you know, one of the things I do want to talk about, mTOR, you know, we want to inhibit mTOR, and I'll tell you what, it is a real crazy thing with these various pathways. And I want to go through some of that. And I really should do a whole thing on just on mTOR and on the AMP activated kinase pathway. And the reason is that when you activate mTOR, you're activating, for instance, the rebuilding of muscle. You have, and you can see this. It actually increases the number of new mitochondria. So it's the genesis of mitochondria. We know that it's involved in the way that the nerve cells work. We know it's involved with memory and to enhance memory. But we also know that these high levels of mTOR are associated with a number of different conditions. We know that when you activate the mTOR, you have a higher incidence of cancer. You have a higher incidence of, like we talked about, obesity. We know that depression is worse. Diabetes can be a problem. There can be various neurodegenerative problems. People who have a higher incidence with things like post-traumatic stress. I was trying to think exactly how to. And the reason is because if you have an issue with, if you're consolidating more of these memories and you have an issue with, we would want to inhibit the mTOR. Now, so when you inhibit mTOR, what's that associated with? It was one of the best things, and that is a longer life. It's associated with longevity. It's associated with decreased inflammation. It's associated with decreases in cancer. So the thing is that there's a balance, though. It's not like it's just all good and all bad. So that you have, when you have more growth, like when there's muscle growth, and you see somebody that's easy to put on muscle, and you also see, I talked about this before, mTOR causes tend to be associated with acne. So people who have a lot of acne will tend to have a lot of higher amounts of mTOR. And you'll see that especially in young kids when they're in their adolescence, and that's when you'll start to see them develop more. You know, you go from the skinny person, you start seeing them put on muscle. In fact, if they start lifting weights during that period of time, that you'll see that they'll really be able to they'll really be able to develop with weight training. And yet, that as that produces, as you're creating these new cells, you're also creating a lot of byproducts of that. So you're creating a lot of, you're creating some products within the cell that the cell is that we would want removed. In other words, it's junk organelles, junk DNA, junk, and that's the whole process of autophagy. And we talked about that. Autophagy is taking out the old and replacing it with the new. It actually means self-eating. But when mTOR is high, you can't have autophagy. Okay, and then the reason is that you're going through these phases. And the one phase is let's build, and the other one is let's repair. So when you're repairing, you're resting. When you're building, you're not only building, but there's a lot more cellular exhaust. There's a lot more junk that's being created. And so all of these things are they're cycles. And that's one of the things that you'll see that I talk about. It's all about cycles. We have our NutriMost Forever program. It's completely about cycling. It's about cycling to create it's really about this inflammation, whether you're spiking inflammation or decreasing inflammation. We know that insulin is basically, when you start to take a look, what inhibits some of these things that's one of the biggest one again is insulin. So what are some of the natural the things that you can do to inhibit mTOR? Well, we know that one of the things that you can do is you can basically you can have calorie restriction. And we talk about that calorie restriction. You'll see there's people who do calorie restriction to live longer. But there's also some different, and by the way, when we talk about calorie restriction, what we find out with mTOR, it seems to be more related to proteins. So it's about restricting certain proteins. You'll see certain people say it's certain proteins. They'll talk about leucine or lysine or methionine restriction and different, but it's really just restricting your proteins, restricting your calories. It's about basically exercise is going to inhibit it in certain cells because mTOR is in various cells. You have it in the liver and fat cells, and it's also in the brain and muscle cells. And exercise is interesting because it increases it into the muscle cells, decreases it into the liver and fat cells. So that's an interesting one. But let's take a look at some of the products. That's resveratrol, we know, curcumin or curcuminoid, which is from turmeric. The EGCG, which is your green tea, that's going to be great for that. And you're going to have the Hydro M is really going to do a great job with that as well. So these are all things that can basically decrease your mTOR. And there's some other things we know that get the liver functioning properly. And it's interesting, the products that help the liver, like curcumin, are very good at that. But also you can use things like milk thistle, which is in, for instance, and our HepatoMost product is what we use for that. But I'm just giving just overall. But one of the biggest things is that AMP, activated protein kinase pathways, will inhibit mTOR, and that activation, if you can activate those pathways, and that's what our programs are all about. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why you'll see when you're doing the NutriMost weight loss program, people they have low inflammation. They can overcome some of these challenges because, like I said, when you're activating mTOR, basically you're activating the aging process. That's really what you're doing. You're making it much more susceptible to things like autoimmune challenges, cancer, depression, and just a whole host of things. So how do you actually, how do you use cold thermogenesis? In cold thermogenesis, some people they get into it 100%, where they're they're basically going out and dunking into water outside, and you see the polar bear club and a lot of these different things like that. Um, and by the way, and I will say this when we talk about that, there are things that will actually, cold thermogenesis, it's more than just, and I'm seeing if I have any research papers on this here. No, I don't see it. Well, I should have put this up, but cold thermogenesis, one of the things, and that's just really just exposing yourself to cold. And I mean, they have, and you can even see that, they used to even use when you can sort of, as you decrease that mTOR, and that's what they would even do with, even with cancer therapies, when they would do, the people losing their hair, they used to use like an ice skull. Ice cap, you don't see that as much, although it has been shown to do some different things. But there are a couple things that happen when you are exposed to cold. And you can build up to that. Believe me, don't just go out and just try to do this. There's ways that you can do it. There's sleeping with the temperature down in your house. But remember, if you're not, if you're using things like the resveratrol, if you're restricting your calories, or if you're restricting some of that protein, that's going to help activate that. But once you have leptin sensitivity, and that's why it's so important to do the, for instance, molecular hydrogen. One of the things is that when you're able to do like and activate the brown fat, one of the things that happens is with cold thermogenesis, it does a process called mitochondrial uncoupling. And what that does is that actually upregulates your entire metabolism. And so it's not just, when we talk about upregulating the metabolism, it's not just about upregulating in your brown fat. It's about upregulating it in skeletal muscle. You want to really get, each day you should get goosebumps. Each day you should get shivers. I mean, that allows you to really activate this. And one of the things that the cold activates, and they have cold vests. I actually have I have an ice vest, and I won't say I don't use it very often. It's uncomfortable. Let's face it, it is uncomfortable. I think that there's some other ways. Let's get our body leptin sensitive, but sometimes in order to have that occur, we need to really get the body so it's driving blood sugars into the cell, activating the brown fat, activating adiponectin. And adiponectin is a hormone that's actually released during cold exposures. And what that does is it helps break down your fat, and it helps take the glucose and bring it into the muscle, so it actually lowers your blood sugar levels. And what you'll find out is when people you'll hear diabetes. Why? Because diabetes is associated with obesity. Why is that? Because when you're in this fat-burning state, your body is able to take that blood sugar and actually put it into use it for energy. And you really want to use it for energy. And what we found out is that it actually does so many different things as far as helps clear out the pathways. Like when you start to get into this, when you inhibit autophagy, you are when you are inhibiting mTOR, you are enhancing autophagy. You are enhancing the replacement of bad cells with good, healthy cells. So you can do that with even intermittent fasting. Everything that we do in our NutriMost Forever program, that's one of the things that we do. And that's one of the things we find out, that when you expose the body to cold, when you get your brown fat cells functioning properly, when they looked at PET scans, when they've looked at the uptake of glucose, what they found is, and I talked about this at the beginning, there's about a 12 times increase in the use of glucose when you expose the body to cold temperatures. But you have to have the body leptin sensitive. So it's all about you know, getting your body in this shape, in this this ideal state. So right now, I'll tell people to go out and do grounding. People say, "Hey, doc, it's wintertime or it's snowing." I said, "Snow has better conduction. You'll have better fat burning." But the other thing is that drop in temperature, when the body is leptin sensitive, will activate the brown fat cells, and it really will activate it to produce. So the brown fat, its job, and that's why like animals that hibernate have much higher amounts of brown fat. Why? See, and now you have to remember what it's doing. It's taking it from your white blood cell, the white adipocytes, the white fat, and it takes the white fat and it converts it and uses it to brown fat for energy. So the brown fat helps burn your white fat. Brown fat takes energy and produces it into heat. Whereas your white fat, it takes glucose in the form of energy and takes it into stored energy. In other words, so that your body can create, for instance, so it can use that energy throughout the day. That your body needs energy. But you want to have that system all balanced. And so these are some of the things that we can do. And I just wanted to go real quickly into what, we went into last week and go through that part one. And I went through these various factors with this on really some of the research on brown fat. And you're going to find out that there's things that you can do, and all the things that you hear that increases longevity, that decreases diabetes, that you're going to find out that primarily most of those are going to inhibit mTOR, activate the AMP, activated protein kinase pathway. They're going to activate brown fat. They're going to balance your metabolism. But remember, even if it's balanced in the other direction, if it goes too much in the other direction, that's a problem too. It's all about having the proper balance within the body. So it's all about balance. I just wanted to do a quick review on this today. And again, it's about brown fat. It's about activating your brown fat. You can activate it by, there are some products that will activate it, but remember, let's get leptin sensitive. We believe that the hydromolecular does an amazing job because of the impact of FGF21. I believe the NutriMost will help with some of these. Let's make sure that you're having proper, that the kidneys are functioning right, the liver is functioning right. Let's get your body balanced, and really let's get ourselves into a condition that allows us to obtain not only homeostasis within the body, but just a better level of energy overall. And when you have that better level of energy, it means you have a body that is balanced. Alrighty, we will see you next week. Remember, let me see if I put this on here. Every single Thursday, there it is. You can visit us at NutriMost.com. You can go see our reviews at NutriMostReviews.com. This is going to be placed on NutriMostScience.com. But remember, we live stream every Saturday, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Hope to see you there. Bye.